My name is John Passfield. The title of this reading will be M Montgomery, Video 30, Personal Imagery. So here is my novel, M Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. And here's a summary on the back cover of the novel. In 1938, with another world war looming and her own personal problems threatening to overwhelm her, acclaimed Canadian author M Montgomery begins to write what she has decided will be her final Anne novel. As she works on the new book, she recalls the days when Anne of Green Gables became a worldwide literary phenomenon and the dilemma that she faced at that time, whether to write a series of novels in which Anne would perpetually remain the child the world had come to know and love, or to allow Anne to grow to adulthood with all the agonizing torments of the one who had given her life, M Montgomery. So it's 1938, and in my novel, M Montgomery is writing a new novel. That novel is this novel, Anne of Ingleside, which will be the final novel with Anne as a character. As she works on that novel through the 16 chapters of my novel, M Montgomery thinks about Anne of Green Gables, which she wrote 33 years before, from 1938 back to 1905, as far as memory goes, and the novel in which Anne was a child. And at which time, being given a contract to write more Anne novels, she had that choice. Should she keep Anne as a child or let her grow to adulthood? She made the choice to let her grow to adulthood, but now she's wondering whether she made the right choice. Now, my novel, M Montgomery, is a poetic novel. The aim of the poetic novel writer is to develop a cluster of techniques that will parallel the way in which we humans think about the lives that we're living. Two of the image categories in the poetic novel are the social imagery technique and the personal imagery technique. Under the heading of social imagery, I would place imagery about such large topic elements as race, religion, nationality, and so on. All the things that people either have in common or over which they find themselves to be in contention. Under the heading of personal imagery, the topic of this reading, I would place imagery about such close to oneself topics as the attempt to figure out one's place in these larger human constructs. So how do I fit into these larger social, religious, racial constructs? In simple terms, personal images are the building blocks of thought in an attempt to answer two questions. The first question, how did I get here? And the second question is, where should I want to go, hope to go, strive to go from here? So those are the two everyday questions. How do I get to today, and where do I want to be tomorrow? A personal imagery paragraph is made up of 3 single sentence images. There are 3 of these paragraphs in each chapter of thought in the mind of the main character, which means that there are 9 single sentence images in each chapter. Since there are 16 chapters of thought in the mind of the main character, there are 144 personal image sentences in the novel. So these are just single sentences, but single sentences of significance. Let's look at the first image paragraph, the first 3 single sentence personal images in each of 5 chapters. So I could do this with 16, but to save time, I will just do it with the first 5. So here are 3 sentences that have significance for the main character. A young girl and an older person on a buggy. A person who feels trapped inside a dream. A character on the brink of her future life, okay? So those sentences start off chapter 1 of thought. For chapter 2 of thought, here are 3 significant sentences. A young lady who is 16 and a half. A mother who dies in childbirth. Bottles of wine scrubbed and waiting to be filled. Let's go to chapter 3. 3 sentences of significance. Letters sent from Denmark and Japan. A minister who mumbles and sits down. A doctor who prescribes endless pills. Chapter 4. A time limit on bread and butter and milk. an author who talks to her character. A book in which every word is wrong. And then chapter 5, the last one I'll do to illustrate this point. A pack of lies which are spoken at a funeral. A canopy of white blossoms on a road. A person who has suffered crushing defeat. So these are all just single sentences of significance. Her mind is trying to put them all together in a pattern. That's the point I'm going to make here. Now, what is the main character attempting to do by contemplating these single sentence images in the 16 chapters of her thought? Well, what I read is just a sampling of the single sentences images in the mind of the main character. I read 15 single sentence images. As I mentioned before, there are 144 single sentence images interacting in the mind of the main character and interacting with all the other imagery in the mind of the main character as well. We all encounter thousands of items of information as we live our lives. Think of the thousands of items of information that one's mind must process just in walking across the room, in walking across the street, or in driving one's car, or riding a bus, or a streetcar across town. I have no idea whether anyone has calculated how many thousands, millions, perhaps trillions of pieces of information our minds must take in through our senses just in order for us to live our daily lives through the months, years, and decades that we spend here on Earth. I would contend that it's the task, the quest, the requirement, the necessity of the human mind to sort through all of these hundreds, thousands, millions, and trillions of items of information that we take in over the course of our lives and to divide them into categories. The two biggest categories would be the trivial and the significant. I also believe that the human mind operates on two levels. So here's number one. The one level I would call the conscious level. You could also call it the subsistence level. You could also call it the practical level. This is the level at which the human mind assigns the labels of trivial or significant to the pieces of information that might allow us to answer successfully the questions of the day. So that's what she's doing. These single sentences are significant items in her life. She wants to know what to think about them. Where should I go and what should I do? What decision should I make in order to enhance my life? What decision should I make in order to avoid diminishing my life? These are the practical, everyday questions that we must answer in order to live successfully in our personal and our working lives, on what I would call the surface level of our lives, the everyday level of our lives. Okay, here's number two. The other level I would call the subconscious level. I would call it the contemplative level. I would call it the speculative level. This is the level at which the human mind assigns the labels of trivial or significant to the pieces of information that might allow us to answer successfully the questions of a lifetime. So we have everyday questions. That was number one. We have lifetime questions. What is the purpose and value of life here on Earth? What has brought this earth into being, and what is my relationship with that unknown power? What can or should I do in order to bring my life into a better relationship with a force that I'm not quite able to comprehend or to label? These are the speculative, cosmic, spiritual questions that we choose to ask because we are thinking creatures on what I would call the contemplative level of our lives. Now, I don't believe we can ever figure out the purpose of our lives as humans here on the earth and in this vast universe whose ends we have not been able to see. I do feel, though, that the human mind is a contemplative instrument at its deepest level. So, at the deepest level, the human mind is sorting through all the information and ideas that have come to it over the days, the months, and the decades, and labeling those items of information ideas into two categories, trivial and potentially significant. So all those one-line sentences are significant to M Montgomery, the main character. What the human mind does next at its deepest level is to form these items of information into patterns. Now, when items of information are placed side by side, they create an image. They create an image because the human mind asks itself, why have these two items of information been placed side by side? Not only does the human mind place items of information side by side, but it speculates as to the potential meaning of the placement of these images. And so complex is the human mind that it can create image patterns in which it places hundreds, thousands, and perhaps even millions of items, not just side by side, but in intricate patterns of potential meaning. The form of the novel, which I write, is a 50,000-word novel. There are writers who write 1,000-page novels, and writers like Marcel Proust write 7-volume novels. What I and these other novelists are attempting to do is to parallel the process by which the human mind sorts, selects, and places significant imagery in patterns of potential meaning. So that's what M Montgomery's mind is doing in my novel. Sorting, selecting, and placing significant imagery in patterns. I believe that all human beings do this at the subconscious level of their minds. I think it's true to say that only some human beings do this at the conscious level of their minds. All human beings sort information into trivial and significant at the conscious level of their minds for practical purposes, but I think it's true enough to say that only some human beings are aware that they're also sorting out imagery and patterning it at the deepest level of their minds in an attempt to consider what it is to be human. Among those who are conscious of the subconscious process of their minds are those who create serious literature. The fact that they do this allows the rest of us to look at the deepest levels of their speculative minds in operation. So if you want to know what Shakespeare was doing when he was sorting the significant items of his life, have a look at one of his plays. So this is my novel, M Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. It's found on Amazon. If you have a look there, there's more information. It's found at my publisher's website, which is roxmillspress.com. There's more information there. At my website, johnpassfield.ca, JOHNPASSFIELD.ca. There are 2 free books, a planning notebook and a journal. So if you have a look at those 2 books, just by clicking on the cover icon at johnpassfield.ca, you'll see what I was thinking as I was writing and then polishing this novel. Lastly, I'll say thank you for watching this video.